What's up, New Hope family? Welcome to episode 2 of the show with no name. That's right, it still has no name. With me, as always, is Pastor Leo. Hello, Pastor Leo.
¿Cómo está, everyone?
It is great to be here. I hope you enjoyed the theme song that once again may or may not exist at the beginning of the show. We're very glad to have all of you with us.
I really want it to exist, though.
I do too. Yeah. We're recording episodes. If you didn't notice from us wearing the same clothes, if you watch the video podcast, we're recording episodes 1 and 2 at the same time. So we're still living in a world where we don't know if Michael is going to record the song or not.
Yep.
But I believe he's going to. First of all, he's a beautiful singer.
Yes.
And he likes to sing.
Yes.
And secondly, it's genius.
Mm-hmm.
And who wouldn't want to record something that's genius? It'll probably, and I don't feel like I'm overstating things, turn him into a billionaire.
There we go.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Multi-platinum recording artist, Michael Bierce, all because of the jingle for the show with no name.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed it, assuming you heard it. Oh, man. Leo, how have you been in the 5 minutes since we... I guess it's been more like 15 minutes since we recorded the last episode.
Has it been 15 minutes?
Probably. Yeah.
Something like that, maybe. Yeah?
I have a different beverage.
Who?
Yep.
What is it again?
Dr. Thunder.
Dr. Thunder.
Pretty great. I love Shasta.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have Shasta in the Philippines?
No, we don't have
That's
Shasta.
sad.
We just have, what's that? Sarsi.
What?
Mm-hmm.
What is Sarsi? Sounds like witchcraft.
It's like sarsaparilla.
Oh, I like sarsaparilla because sarsaparilla is like root beer.
Right. So it's what we have, and then there's another one. I forgot the name right now. It's a cheaper kind of cola.
Shasta.
Maybe Shasta.
That's what Shasta is.
Just a different name. But yeah, it's
okay.
We
is it
have
RC Cola?
RC.
Yes.
There we go. People love RC.
RC Cola.
All right.
Crown Cola or something they call themselves. And it's not true. But it's fine. I like RC. RC's great. RC's not bad.
Some people love RC. Like in the Philippines, some people love RC better than Coke or Pepsi.
I mean, I like it better than Pepsi. So I'm on board with half of that.
Right. But not Coke?
MyRC.church, I think, is the website for my dad's church, which has nothing to do with the cola, but that's what I'm thinking of now that we're saying RC 100 times over and over.
For those who are thirsty, go grab a drink.
Yeah. Join. Maybe you have some Shasta.
Mm-hmm.
Shasta was, oh man, we forgot to turn
All I have is my water and my lens cap.
We forgot to turn the heater off. We forgot to turn the heater off.
Oh, it's blasting
this is
on
really
you.
Disappointing. This is what happens when Michael's gone. It's just a disaster. Leo and I talk about Shasta, and the heat goes on. Hopefully, no one's playing piano. Although I have learned who was playing piano during episode 1.
Who was it?
I don't know if we'll unveil it or not. We'll have to see. Let us know in the comments if you want to know who it... First of all, maybe once we threw a filter on the audio, you couldn't hear the piano anyway.
Yeah, but we did talk about it.
But we did talk about it. So if you would like to know who was very beautifully playing the piano really loud,
we'll do an unveiling
right outside our podcast studio, let us know in the comments, and maybe we'll let you know in episode 3.
Right.
That's a teaser. See, that's like the end of an Avengers movie when we're like, you better come back for the next movie to find out who was playing the piano.
Should have done it at the end, more like
I should have. Yeah, I should have.
End credit kind of thing.
Maybe I'll say it at the end of this episode if you stick around the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
You never know. I want to get back to Shasta for a minute. Shasta was like the cheap Walmart brand. I think it still is, although I found this at a different grocery store.
Oh, okay.
So apparently it's not only at Walmart anymore. But when I was a kid, we never had soda, ever. The only time we had soda in the house, we would buy some 2 liters of pop if we were having like people over, right? Like we were going to grill out in the backyard or something like that. And then whatever was left over remained in the house, and we got to drink that. But when... We didn't have a Walmart in our town. We had a Target, But we would go over to the next town to Walmart sometimes, and they had the pop machines as you walk in, and the Shasta machine was still like 10 cents for a can of pop.
Oh, wow.
And so my mom would let us get a can from the Shasta machine. Mountain Lightning, I believe, was the Mountain Dew knockoff. Delicious.
Ooh. And then the Dr. Thunder.
Dr. Thunder was the Dr. Pepper one. Then you obviously you had your
Thunder.
Shasta Cola. They had a lemon lime one. I don't remember what it was. I can't remember the name of that one. I never got that one.
Not Sierra Mist?
Mountain. Well, it was better than Sierra Mist, but that's a low bar. But let us know your favorite Shasta knockoff soda flavor.
Or your favorite cola, or...
I'm okay with that.
They call it soft drinks in the Philippines.
Soft drink. That's, as long as they don't just call all of them Coke. That one, we lived in Oklahoma for 2 years. That drove me insane. My favorite Coke is Sprite. No, it's not. No, it is not.
Hey, we have a lot of that too in the Philippines. I forgot what they call it. Like, they'd ask you to buy Colgate, then you're gonna buy a tube of toothpaste, and then it's not Colgate.
It's just any random.
Colgate is toothpaste, so that kind of thing.
Stop being like the South Philippines. Although I very much enjoy Filipino food, and I really enjoyed the food in the South. So that is a similarity I'm okay with.
Well, there we
go.
go.
The foods aren't the same at all, but they're both delicious. All right. Well, the heater clicking off is our cue from the Lord to start talking about his word. So today we're going to finish up Romans 11.
Yes, we are.
Which it's been 3 episodes now of Romans 11.
How about next one we do 4 episodes?
That seems like a lot.
Or 1 episode per verse.
1 episode per verse. Yeah, that's good. Like 10 minutes
Maybe
per
that's
word.
the name of the podcast.
1 episode per verse. I think that's worse than the current name, and that's a low bar as well. So, no. But yeah, again, if you're just throwing stuff in the comments, if you've got a better name for the podcast than the show with no name, let us know. However, if you did hear the jingle that we were talking about, the theme song, one might say, you probably are like, that's the greatest name ever for a podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Why would you ever change it? But let us know one way or the other. Okay, Leo, give us our summary. So we're in Romans 11, verses 25 through 36. You can find all of the episodes on Romans on the Grow Podcast playlist, or podcast if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. So, and hopefully you're still subscribed to that anyway, because we still want you over there listening to Pastor Mark's podcast, where he's diving deeper into his messages every single week. Make sure you're checking those out. So head over there, listen to those. But that's also where you can find all the old episodes of Romans right now. So if you've missed anything, go ahead and pause us. Go back and listen to those, then come back. Same thing if you haven't read. Go ahead and read those verses quick. It's 12 verses. You can read them pretty quick. But Pastor Leo, why don't you give us our summary of verses 25 through 36 of Romans 11?
Okay, so for this one, Paul continues his discussion about Israel, salvation, and the mystery of God. And his point is this: when we understand the wonder of God's mercy on us and the depths of his wisdom, take note, once we understand that, we will respond with worship. So we will respond with worship. That's the bottom line of especially of chapter 11.
That's great, but let's talk about this mystery. All right, this is like...
what mystery?
It's like a Scooby-Doo episode of the show with no name, or maybe like the third installment of the Nicolas Cage movies with the Declaration of Independence. National Treasure.
Oh, National Treasure.
This is the show with no name, National Treasure edition. We've got a mystery that we're going to solve, and I can't wait. Pastor Leo is going to break down. So we had
Sean Connery last episode.
Yeah, that's right. Somehow
so for this one, it's Nick Cage.
Now you're going to be Nick Cage today.
That's going to be hard.
Just appear in every movie that exists, and then you have done a Nick Cage impression. But yeah, he right away, verse 25, the first verse we're talking about. I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery. Now, when I read this, all of it in context, before you broke it down so beautifully for us last week, I would look at how dough turned into a tree being the mystery. Ooh. Because I still am bothered by him starting with a bread analogy and then it turns into an olive tree, even though you did explain it to us last week. So when I read this the first time, I'm like, well, he's clearly talking about the bread into tree mystery, but I don't think that's what it is.
No, it's not.
Based on what you said last week. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what this mystery is?
Okay, so Paul was talking about something that was hidden and is now revealed through the gospel. So
like a map on the back of the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what he's talking
about? Well, what movie was that? Gone in 60 Seconds?
With all the cars? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What name did he give that Mustang?
Eleanor. Eleanor. Yeah, Eleanor.
Eleanor.
The one he was too scared to drive.
Yep. So there goes the rabbit trail again.
Welcome to our Nick Cage podcast. Let us know in the comments your favorite Nick Cage movie. Oh boy.
So
to clarify, if we do Revelation next, Nick Cage did make a Left Behind movie. So we could dive deeper into the Nick Cage.
I forgot about that.
If we choose Revelation next. All right, let us know about this mystery.
Mine, by the way, is Snake Eyes.
Interesting.
Nick Cage movie, yeah.
I'm not going to answer, so we can get back to Romans, even though I really want to.
Right. Okay, so Paul's talking about something that was hidden and is now revealed through the gospel. What that is this one. The mystery he's talking about here is what we just talked. Remember that time when David asked a question, I told him that he already had the answer in his question. So it's something like this. So yeah. The mystery he's talking about here is what we just talked about, which is this one. Israel has experienced a hardening. Remember the one where we talked about Pharaoh too, when God hardened his heart.
Yep.
So Israel has experienced a quote unquote hardening until the full number of the Gentiles has come in. So here's a few things to note about this. So this hardening is partial and temporary. It is not permanent like what God did with Pharaoh, where it was permanent and then he was, well, we know what happened. If you don't, read Exodus. It's not happy ending for Pharaoh, but
Nope.
Yep, no, it's not. So this hardening is partial and temporary. Once the full number of Gentiles have come to salvation, Israel's hardening will end. So you will see this in chapter 11, verse 26 to 27. Now, for this to happen, for the full number of Gentiles to come in and come to salvation, the gospel must first be preached to all nations. We see this in Mark chapter 13 and verse 10.
Okay, so verse 26. Right after he says that until the full number of Gentiles has come in, 26 starts and it says, and in this way all Israel will be saved. And then he starts to quote some scripture.
Right.
That's an interesting and confusing verse considering everything we've been talking about. How again, even last week, like they're on branches that are no longer a part of the tree. Like they're they can come back in, but like they're gone. Like he talks a lot about how a lot of Israel is lost and is going to remain lost. And, and now he says that all Israel will be saved. So does that mean like the specifically the nation of Israel, which again, like the nation of Israel had a lot of confusion historically about like what the Messiah meant and what it really meant for them to be saved.
Right.
When Jesus, that's why so many of them rejected Jesus, was that he's like, that's not what the Messiah is supposed to do. The Messiah is supposed to overthrow, our oppressors and
that's right.
And bring us back to power. So does it mean the nation of Israel? Does it mean Jew? Does it mean Jews? Does it mean only the Jews who are in the nation of Israel? What is he talking about when he talks about how all of Israel will be saved?
Yes.
Cool. Thanks, Leo. We'll be back for episode 3 of the show with no name.
Okay. So
ridiculous.
Several ways. There are several ways that people have understood.
There's also several ways people have not understood it.
Right. So first, some people say that it refers to the church, meaning the spiritual Israel, meaning it includes us Gentile believers. Some people think, this is the second one, some people think it refers to the Jews God has chosen out of the Jewish people. We talked about this a few episodes back. We call them the remnant.
Which again sounds like the latest M. Night Shyamalan movie.
I know, right?
The Remnant. This Thanksgiving from M. Night Shyamalan.
In a world.
Exactly.
All right, so here's the third one. Some people think it's everyone in the nation of Israel. Number 4 is some people think it's the Jews who are living when Jesus returns. And number 5, and again, this is not a comprehensive list. I'm just listing some of the very common
the main hits,
interpretations. The 5th one is some religious organizations capitalize on this and say that it refers to them because they are the special bunch because, whatever. Insert works of justification. Like they are the ones who worship on X day or do not.
We did this right.
Y
so
kind
we're
of
the
food.
ones he's talking about in verse 26.
So that refers to us.
Great way to start a cult, if you're interested.
Yeah.
Please don't start a cult.
Flan or something like that.
Oh man. Like I'm not gonna join your cult, but like that's tempting.
See? Told you. Very tempting. Very easy.
So which one's right?
Well, okay.
Definitively, with no questions. No, I'm just kidding. Because sometimes there are things that are like you said, we have to interpret them, right? And they're not like a salvation issue. It's like my salvation is not determined on whether I understand that verse 100% accurately or not.
That's
Is
true.
that fair to say?
That's true.
But it doesn't mean we shouldn't try to figure it out.
Yes.
So there are godly people who fall in different areas of the understanding of that verse.
And it's probably somewhere in the middle,
like we've talked about in the past.
Yep.
So where do you land as a godly person?
My personal take on this, based on what Paul has been discussing so far, it is logical that he would be referring to the people of Israel who have been provoked to jealousy, because Paul has been talking about jealousy and being jealous about what the Gentiles has had and all of that stuff. So it refers to the people of Israel who have been provoked to jealousy and were saved, as Paul says in verse 14. That's my personal take on it. If you have a different opinion, I respect that totally.
What if their opinion is it's about the people who created Shasta? Do you respect that opinion?
Ooh, as long as you like RC too.
Yeah, man. We need to get some RC Cola in this place. Stay tuned for an upcoming episode where I will be drinking probably a diet RC Cola, and it will be wonderful.
It'll be great.
Quick side note: if you're ever at the Minnesota State Fair, the best place to get a drink there is there's one in the entire. The Minnesota State Fair is massive. For those of you who are not from Minnesota or haven't ever been there. Like ridiculously massive.
Oh, wow.
And in this huge fair, there's one tiny little spot that sells RC Cola, Diet RC Cola, I believe 7-Up, and then like some root beer thing. But it's so much, it's like $3 for a large one, which at the state fair is mind-blowing.
For a state fair, that is mind-blowing.
And so go head over to the RC Cola booth. I don't know what, it's not even a booth. It's like a little cart. Next time you're at the Minnesota State Fair. I felt like that was important information that everybody needed since we've been talking so much about RC Cola.
And we will appreciate if you will bring some of it here.
Yeah, bring us some as well. I think what needs to happen is we need to do a live episode of the Show with No Name from the Minnesota State Fair next year during the fair season.
We'll do the episode while we're riding on one of the roller coasters.
Excellent idea. Yeah, or in like the pig barn. We'll have the biggest pig in Minnesota behind us, who's right at the front entrance of the pig barn, just making no. Actually, they can barely move; they just lay there the whole time. So we'll have him in the background. It'll smell great.
Oh yeah.
Getting back on track here. To clarify, look for a comment from my dad about our rabbit trails, and then something that I said wrong about the Minnesota State Fair that he's going to correct. They actually don't have 7-Up; they have this drink instead.
Oh, so now you sound like Sean.
Yeah, my dad does actually. That's why this is a perfect impression. All right, so Paul is still talking. We've kind of been talking about this a bunch, but even going back to when he was talking about how there's no differentiation between a Jew and Gentile, but we're still kind of talking about the joining together of the Gentile believers, the Jewish believers. Malachi and Cassius, if you remember from last week.
Todd.
and Todd. Yeah. All of the above.
Okay, so what Paul is doing, he's drilling this into the church in Rome. Paul must have had, think about it. Paul must have had tons of objections from Jewish believers, and that's why he's doing this, right? This must be a very important truth that we, not just them, really need to wrap our minds on. Because here's the thing. The remnant of Israel who believe in Jesus will one day join us Gentile believers in inheriting the kingdom of God. It is something that will happen in the future, but it is going to happen. Why? Because both Gentiles and Jews are, well, we have to be honest. Gentiles and Jews are both disobedient to God, and only by God's mercy will any of them be accepted. That's verses 30 to 32. Again, they can't use their Jewishness as an advantage, and our Gentileness, quote unquote, is not a disadvantage because, well, we talk about this a lot, and I talk about this a lot. God looks at the heart.
Yeah. And he really starts to point out that contrast in these next verses 30 and 31. And it's so interesting to me, the like flip of the reality of the Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
Where the Jewish people were, we're God's chosen people, and look at how bad everything else is. Like that's what we would be if we weren't here with God. And now it's flipped now to the point where Paul is using the Gentiles as the positive example for the Jewish people. Look at how much better things are going for them as they accept Jesus, and you now are the ones who are disobedient and need that mercy. Like they were the lost ones before, and now and he just dives more and more into that contrast in these next couple verses. Again,
Cassius over there in the corner has become very silent.
Yeah. Yes. I think Malachi just left. Yeah. So now Ruth is standing over there by Cassius, and it's getting really uncomfortable.
Right.
Yep.
So yeah.
If you don't get those references, you weren't here for episode 1, or the things we say aren't as memorable as we think they are. One of the two. If it's the former, go back and listen to episode 1. If not, we apologize.
Bad.
That's our bad. Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
This is the best we can do.
Okay.
Why don't you talk about that contrast a little bit?
Here's the thing. Contrasting both. Paul says, for the Gentiles, he was saying, you were disobedient before. And then for the Jews, he's saying, you're now being disobedient. So there's no big difference between you two. You have been disobedient before, Gentiles. Now, Jews, you are being disobedient. And then for the Gentiles, you have obtained mercy. And for the Jews, Paul is saying that someday the Jewish believers will obtain mercy. And for the Gentiles, you obtained mercy through the Jews' unbelief, which is why Paul and his companions, just like what we talked about last episode, they went to the Jewish people and they were accepted better. And then for the Jews, Paul is saying they will obtain mercy someday through the mercy God has shown to the Gentiles. So again, no difference at all.
And he concludes it a bit in verse 32.
He says both groups, Jews and Gentiles, went through or are going through a period of disobedience.
Yeah. Which is, again, it's just so interesting to see the similar, they're experiencing the same things just at different times.
Right.
Not that every Gentile has accepted Jesus, which we obviously know it's not accurate, but just collectively as a people, going through these things at different times, but the same things. Just once again showing that we're all the same under God, and that same that we all are is not nearly enough, and it relies on God to save us, relies on what Jesus did. let's hang on verse 32 for a second.
Right.
I'm going to read it quick. For God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all.
Mm-hmm.
This verse is used a lot by people who believe that in the end, God's going to save everybody. There's different means to that end. And there's a lot of different groups that have different routes to how God's going to do that. But it's universal salvation.
No one's going to hell.
Relatively popular doctrine, and not like, it's not like it's super, super prominent, but it's, I remember when I was in college, there was a book written by a pastor in Michigan whose name I can't remember. But he was like a pretty prominent evangelical pastor. And he wrote this book. It would have been like 2006-ish, give or take a few years. And he was pushing the doctrine of universal salvation. And it was the first time that like a famous pastor that was just like he was one of us started pushing that. And I remember a lot of the kids that I was at school with started drifting that way because man, it's a lot more comforting to believe that, right? Like, and it's easier. It's easier to justify this God that I believe in and I love and I consider to be loving. Well, then I don't have to deal with any of the mess if in the end everybody's going to be saved. And so then I read this verse, and it's God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he then may have mercy on all of them. So, so he made them sin, and now he is going to give them all mercy. So what say you, Pastor Leo?
Well, okay.
I'm going to look up that book while you talk real quick.
Oh, okay, go.
Don't read it, though.
Yeah. All right. So according to that doctrine, which David just mentioned, it's all human souls, regardless of their sins or beliefs or whatever it is that they're doing, will ultimately be reconciled to God due to God's divine love and mercy. So but here's the thing. Paul was not talking about universal salvation when he wrote that verse. What Paul was referring to, and again, it's very easy to misrepresent or misunderstand what Paul is saying if you just focus on one verse, which is why context matters. So Paul has been talking about the Gentiles and the Jews and the contrast between them two, and he continues on this verse. And so Paul is referring, if you take the context of what he has been talking about for the past several verses already, Paul was referring to all of the Jews and Gentiles who put their trust in Jesus.
Right.
Doesn't mean everyone. It just means everyone who puts their trust in Jesus.
Yeah. It'd be awesome if it was everyone.
Yeah.
I think Paul would have been a fan of that. Rob Bell is the pastor I was thinking of. He wrote a book called Love Wins. Do you remember that? Remember that one? Yeah. And I
never read it. Now I'm glad I didn't.
Yeah, I read it. It was very well written. It was very convincing. Like I understand why it really messed with a lot of people's understanding of, again, verses like that, which can, when you take them out of context. We talked about it last week, I think, how important context is. We talk about it a lot. It's really, really important to understand the context of the things we're reading, because if I just sit there and read verse 32. Yeah, like I'm probably going to start to believe different things, right? Because I'm taking it out of context. So Paul, there's 4 verses left.
Yes.
And you said it at the beginning that like it's gonna, like when we understand these things, they're gonna lead to worship.
Yes.
And he kind of starts just praising God here, and it seemed it would be a really great time to end the letter, but this is not the last episode we'll be doing Romans, because he's Paul, and he probably was like, we're going to end the letter here. And then he's like, actually, I have 4 more chapters of things that I want to talk about because I'm Paul. No, 5 more.
Yeah.
5 more. 5 more.
P.S. Chapter 1.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, they were addendum. Yep. Addendum 1, chapter 12. But yeah, we've got some worship here.
Yeah.
In fact, you might... If you're reading in certain Bibles, you might see the little like headers for the different areas those were I think we've talked about this before on the Grow podcast, but those were added after the fact, just like the verses,
Yep.
just to kind of help us categorize things and, find things easier. But in some books, it'll say doxology before these. Not in the ESV that I currently have open, but when I was reading it in the NIV, it says doxology. That might be a word familiar to some people. So talk to us a little bit about what Paul's doing here in these last few verses.
Doxology is just praises to God.
Yeah.
Right?
Just a fancy word that theologians like to use to make them sound smart.
Ooh, the doxology podcast.
I remember when I was like in some theology classes and like all these theological words, these Christian words, these church words, and then they can be explained very simply. Like, I'm like, why didn't we just use those words that everybody knows? Why did we have to, like 500 years ago, put this really complicated word on it? There's nothing wrong with it. It just, Anyway, let's talk about the doxology here, Leo.
It's very jargonic.
I don't even know that one.
Jargon.
Oh, okay. I thought you said jargonic, and I was
jargonic.
Is that like a jury?
Okay, so chapter 11 is actually a turning point in Paul's letter to the church in Rome. The first 11 chapters dealt mostly with doctrine. That's why we have been taking our time, diving through all of these and taking our time discussing it because it's all about doctrine. The last 5, though, focuses more on practical application. So that's why it's more like a PS, chapter 1 for chapter 12. Paul is a great teacher. He knows that doctrine by itself only builds up knowledge. And the Bible talks about this. 1 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 1 says, knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. So if you only talk about doctrine, it only builds on knowledge, and knowledge puffs up. So chapter 12, and this is the turning point, the next 5 chapters focus on the application of the past 11 chapters.
And we try to do the same thing with the Grow podcast, where Leo gives you I blew it. That's the first time. That's my first mistake.
No.
I'm so sorry. To be fair, we do try to do that on the Grow podcast as well. But so the Grow podcast, the show with no name, any of the things that we're doing, the purpose is not just so we can fill our heads with this knowledge and feel smarter, be that puffed up Gentile that we were talking, be Malachi in the corner.
No, Cassius.
Cassius in the corner before Paul really turns things on its head. But we regularly say, like, let's not just, like I listened to the Grow podcast, I did my duty to learn and grow this week and not have it change how we live in any way. Then we've accomplished nothing.
Right.
And so, like that verse you just read from 1 Corinthians, like knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. Well, when we put these things into practice, like we're pretty much everything we're learning is us loving people in one way or another, right? And so let's always make sure it's not us saying that. It's usually me that says it, I guess. It's not just my idea that like we should do these things that we're learning. Like that's from the Bible. And the reason I talk about it so much is because my natural inclination is just to learn the knowledge. I like learning. Yes. I enjoy it. I like having a better understanding of things. I like gaining knowledge, knowing more things. And the prideful person, that sinful person that is me, likes to know more than other people. And so knowledge can become a hindrance to actually loving people. The reason we stress so much that we need to act out these things that we're learning is because that's where like we push pride out of the way and we focus on loving other people and being like Jesus. And and so as we're learning these things from Leo, as you're jumping in the comments and writing just incredible answers every single week to these questions that Leo gives us, don't stop at writing it in the comments. How is that changing how you're interacting with people this week? How is that changing your relationship with God this week, your relationship with other people this week? It's so important. And I know I'm just reiterating what Leo said, but that's because this part is so important for us.
Oh yeah.
Paul is now spending the next 5 chapters on the application because we have to apply it. That's what he ends with for a reason. That's the most important step.
Yep.
All of that knowledge is wasted if we're not applying it. So let's
That's
make
right.
sure we're going to get to the questions here in just a minute before Leah has a couple closing thoughts. Let's make sure that the head change, heart change, life change, those questions are actually things that we're applying this week, not
That's
just
right.
talking about.
That's right. So here's the thing with the doxology part, or the praises to God part. When we go to places or see things that take our breath away, like landscapes, works of art, or impressive feats of human engineering.
Or that song, Take My Breath Away.
Oh, yeah.
Could you sing that for us real
Sinead
quick?
O'Connor.
Would you sing that song for us real quick? Just the chorus?
Hold on. I got the intro, the music in my head.
I'm not going to do it because it's real high and no one wants to hear that. Next week. Next week.
Breath away.
There we
Something
go.
Like that, right?
That was really good. Yes.
Yeah. I got the intro.
Thank you.
But anyway, okay. So when we see these things, we can't help but respond with awe. We find ourselves overwhelmed, and we can't help but praise them,
Yep.
right? And we have to admit, there is no one more grander. There's no one more beautiful. There's no one more awe-inspiring than God himself. So the question is, do we sing praises to God the same way that we do those things? Because it's very easy. Like when you go to places like the Grand Canyon or Yellowstone National Park or wherever.
Teddy Roosevelt National Park. All right, let's give some respect to our
Teddy
hometown
Roosevelt
National
too.
Park
Yep.
here. Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes.
That's awesome.
It
So
is, yeah.
when we go to those places, it's very easy for
It
us
is.
to sing praises about what we see. But do we
Yep.
sing praises to God about the things that are, especially the things that are awe-inspiring in our life? So doxology is not just a Paul thing. It should be an all of
Sure.
us thing.
Yeah.
So, okay. So here's your head change, your heart change, and your life change for chapter 11. First one, head change is know. Know that God is abundant in wisdom, knowledge, and mercy. And your heart change is this. Feel gratitude. Again, feel gratitude that God has mercy on you, on me, and on all of us. And here's your life change. Worship God. Again, worship God. It's not just about singing songs. It's about praising God. You can use words. It's just feelings, but praise God. Worship God by marveling at who he is and what he's done for us.
You got some questions for us this week too, Leo?
Yep. Questions? Are we going to do the jingle again?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes. Hopefully we have a Leo's question time jingle. And we will play that here in like 2 seconds. So here it comes now. Awesome. Yeah,
All
thank
right,
you. Thank you
so-
for that. And again, if there were 5 seconds of silence there, that's because Michael refused to make a jingle for us.
Okay.
All right. What are your questions, Leo?
Here are your questions. Number 1, was there ever a point in your life when you rejected the gospel? What was it that transformed you from an enemy of the gospel, quote unquote, enemy of the gospel, to a recipient of the gospel? If you're comfortable putting that in the comments, why not? Might help someone, right? So number 2, what is our proper response to the mercy of God? In what ways do we sometimes miss or overlook his mercy? How can we get better at recognizing and celebrating God's mercy on us? And here's your third one.
And this one, before you go, I would love for this one to be answered by a lot of people in the comments, especially, well, both parts. There's two. It's kind of a 2-part question,
Right.
but I think this is one that can be really difficult sometimes. Like we all understand the concept of I can glorify God and worship him in everything I do, right? Like I'm a basketball coach. I can glorify God. I'm a teacher. I work in the oil field, whatever
Right.
it is. But like when we actually try to do that practically, sometimes it can be difficult to think like I'm just sitting at my desk, like crunching numbers right now. How in the world could this possibly be glorifying to God?
Yeah.
So these questions, I would love for this one to be one that we answer, because I think it would really, really help each other to
I'm just
chat
in the
about.
kitchen listening to the Grow podcast while preparing dinner.
Or the show with no name. Leo did it. It was Leo this time.
I did it.
Yes. 1-1.
It's
all right. Give us question 3.
We're gonna keep a scoreboard.
Yeah, we'll have a scoreboard that pops up.
So
boy.
so that here's your third one. What does it look like for you to glorify God?
Mm-hmm.
How can you be more active and intentional in glorifying God in your life?
Yeah, that's a great one. So yeah, answer some, any, all of those in the comments. And then come back and see what people said to yours, or see what other people wrote and reply to them. But this community that we've been growing and learning from each other has been really, really awesome. And we want that to continue. And we're really, really thankful for it. You are. And then next step, we're going to start Romans 12. So we're going to do verses 1-8 of Romans 12 next week. Yes. So make sure you read those once, twice, 467,000 times by next episode.
Yes, please. We're going to keep count.
Probably not 467,000 times. That's a lot of times. You probably have other things you need to do before then.
That's
like
so true.
Feed your children. Don't get fired at work. But definitely read it a few times and then come back. And make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't subscribed to the show with no name yet, make sure you do that on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, definitely go do that. YouTube.com/New Hope Here, where you can find the show with no name. You can find the Grow podcast, which has Pastor Mark on it now. You can find a bunch of amazing worship. Our most recent night of worship that we did, New Hope Williston and New Hope Tioga and PH Church came together and did another incredible night of worship. There's probably, by the time this episode's up, there's probably like 6, if not more, songs from that night of worship that have already been posted. So
pretty awesome.
Definitely go check all that out. All of our weekend services are on there, all sorts of good stuff. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, and then come back next time. We're going to continue on in Romans. And then, last thing, in the comments, even though you're writing all these other things and all the random stuff we probably talked about at the beginning that we wanted in the comments, any ideas for the next book for us to study? Let us know those in the comments, and we'll decide where we're going next from there. So we love you, New Hope family. We really do. And we're so thankful that you join us every time. Thankful for you, Pastor Leo, and your wisdom and your teaching. And we will see you next time.
Ingat.